8:30, we'll call the Ways and Means Committee to order. And Lisa, if you take the roll, please.
Commissioner Foster?
Here.
Commissioner Harvey-Wright?
Here.
Chairman Hughes?
Here.
Commissioner Waring?
Here.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Here.
Commissioner Nash?
Excused.
Commissioner Snyder?
Excused.
Commissioner Wilkins?
Here.
Commissioner Stoller?
Here. We have quorum, and the first item of business is the approval of the minutes of August 15th. So moved. I've got a motion and support. Are there any? Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes of the 15th? Seeing none, we'll vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Now, we have set time aside for public comment on an agenda item. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment about an item that's on the agenda, now is your opportunity. And I don't see anybody coming forward, so we'll move ahead. We have a public hearing today, the fiscal year 2020 budget. This is one of the legal public hearings, and we have the finance director.
Let's go back to the beginning. Thank you. Beth Dick, Director of Finance in Muskegon County. This afternoon I am going to be giving you a presentation on the proposed 2020 budget for Muskegon County. Commissioners, this is basically the exact same presentation I gave you last, was on the 22nd, so it's been on a couple weeks almost. But a much shortened version of it, so I did not print out new copies. I've already shown you most of these. So. But this is a public hearing for the public and for their purpose. So the budget was distributed to the Board of Commissioners back on August 15th. It is required by law that we hold this public hearing on the budget. And a notice was published in the Chronicle on Sunday, August 25th of this public hearing, as well as a copy of the actual budget document. Has been placed in, since that time has been in the county clerk's office, the Hackley Library, White Lake Library, 2 branches of the Muskegon Library, Area District Library, and it's been on the county website since then. The 2020 general fund budget, property tax revenues. We are including, well, in 2019, the current fiscal year, we experienced a taxable value increase of 3.45%. For 2020, the Consumer's Price Index, which is one of the components that determines the increase of our taxable value, is projecting at a 1.9% increase for 2020. The other component is the increase in the tax base overall, and we're projecting that to be a 1.1% increase from new housing, new business development, and business expansions. So the result of adding those 2 increased components together, we're including in our budget a projection of a 3% overall increase in our taxable value for next year. This graph shows what our property tax revenues have done over the last, going back to 2010. 2009 is really when the recession hit and our property tax revenues started the decline. And you can see that we bottomed out in 2013, and then we started the upward trend from that point on. And we are just now getting back above where we started the decline from back in 2009. But the actual amount of revenue, the cumulative amount that we lost due to the recession and the decline in our tax base from 2010 to 2017 was $18 million over that time period, over that 10 years, or excuse me, 7 years. Other revenues that the general fund has, some larger revenues besides property taxes, is state revenue sharing. And based on the governor's budget, which again, nothing's been approved by the state at this point, but we are assuming a 2.8% increase, which is $101,000 for us, giving us $3.774 million in state revenue sharing for 2020, again, based on the governor's budget. Charges for services, which is another large component of our general fund revenues, $9.9 million, is increasing by $312,000 from 2019. And those increases are primarily in the dog license revenues, which our County Board of Commissioners approved some increases in those dog license fees earlier this year to begin October 1st. We have some increases in certified copy revenues and some increases in assessment revenues due to some contract renewals. And then DTRF stands for Delinquent Tax Revolving Fund, where we had a transfer of $1,649,000 for fiscal 19, or excuse me, for fiscal 20 is what we've budgeted, which is down from the fiscal 19 of $1,811,000. And that is money that's generated from people that pay their property taxes late. We get penalties and interest that accumulate in a delinquent tax fund that we then transfer to the general fund. Because the economy is improving, we have less people paying their taxes late, so there's less revenue there for us to be able to transfer on an annual basis. And as I mentioned earlier, the revenue sharing, we've not seen huge increases in that over the last several years. This goes back again to 2010, and you can see that revenue we're at 3.8 million for next year. It's not even as high as the highest year of 2011 of 4.1. So those revenues that we're getting from the state are not going up significantly. On the expenditure side, salaries and fringes make up a large portion of the county's general fund expenditures. They comprise over 50% of those expenditures. Our medical insurance, we're projecting an 18% increase starting January 1st, and that is based on what our insurance broker has informed us for 2020, what we should expect. We have made changes to our insurance. All of our employees are switched over to a health savings account plan. So we've taken away actually a couple of our other plans that were more costly, but even our health savings account plan is expected to go up 18%, which is $609,000 more than the current fiscal year. Our retirement costs are actually decreasing by $429,000 in fiscal 20 compared to fiscal 19, and that is due to the fact that we recently negotiated with our employees that have our defined benefit pension plan a reduction in that benefit for future years of service, as well as we issued pension bonds, and we did a lump sum payment out of one of our enterprise funds to help fund our pension costs. So that has all contributed to that cost going down for 2020. And we've included a decrease in our other post-employment benefit costs. That's what OPEB stands for. A decrease of 25% or $119,000 for the general fund based on some other plan changes that we've implemented for those types of costs. And we've got a workers' comp reserve that has built up for a number of years, so that we're continuing to use that reserve and not charging other county departments for workers' comp charges. Appropriations to other funds, the general fund, another large expenditure besides salaries and fringes, is what the general fund gives to other funds. Many of those funds are grant funds that require a local match. Others are simply funds that need some sort of a subsidy, or we have debt service payments that require a contribution from the general fund. So appropriations represent 27.5% of general fund expenditures. The largest is the red band, which is our child care fund. And then the next largest would be the purple band, which only shows from 2017 forward, which is making the jail JTC debt service payments. And you can see that Brookhaven was the kind of the light blue band in there. That's actually gone away since we've closed Brookhaven. And we've added a white band for the Indigent Defense Fund, or known as the Public Defender's Office, as we have moved that from an operation within the general fund to a separate fund because now we have a grant partially supporting that. Again, these appropriations to other funds, I mentioned the child care fund is the largest one at $4,297,000. The excuse me, jail JTC debt service is $2,649,000. Public health appropriation is $1,791,000. Family friend of the court is $1,311,000. The indigent defense fund is $1,310,000. Health West $737,000, and then the airport fund is $186,000. The airport fund, that represents primarily the local match required, which is 2.5% on all major capital projects. Plus, there's a plan to replace the parking system out at the airport, which has to be 100% paid for by the county. There is no federal or state funding for that. So general fund total revenues budgeted for, in the proposed budget for next fiscal year is $50,222,030. Historically, you see the trend of those revenues, and they're on the upward trend. Excuse me, fiscal 19 looks a little bit high, but at $52.5 million because we had our DTE test and tune program has higher than normal revenues, and you'll see later expenditures in fiscal 19 compared to fiscal 20 due to some expansions in that program. And then we did issue pension bonds in fiscal 19, but I've taken the $41.2 million of those bond proceeds out of this graph, so it doesn't look so abnormally high. Revenues by category, as I mentioned already, property tax revenues make up the largest share of revenues for the county's general fund at 55.48%. The next largest is charges for services, which is in the orange slice. And that's where we have revenues, excuse me, with taxes. That also includes liquor tax revenues, payment in lieu of tax, delinquent tax, and delinquent personal property tax. Charges for services is district court costs, circuit court costs, register of deeds and equalization revenues. The third largest is the intergovernmental in yellow. That's where we have our revenue sharing. We also get money from the state for court equity funding, as well as a personal property tax reimbursement that is all considered intergovernmental. And then the last section is transfers, the last largest section, which is the black slice, which is transfers from this delinquent tax fund, tax forfeiture fund, and the public improvement fund. Thank you.
Now, can you tell me what the public improvement fund is?
That is where we, whenever the county sells property, the county's policy is that those proceeds from those sales go into the public improvement fund to be used primarily for capital projects, but the county board can approve to use it for other things, such as transferring it to the general fund for operational purposes. Excuse me. This depicts the revenues more by dollar amount, so the property tax revenues, if you add the delinquent and the current property tax revenues, you have $26.74 million in revenues for the general fund. The personal property tax reimbursement is $1,490,000. Liquor tax revenues are $860,000. State revenue sharing at $3,770,000. The transfer from the delinquent tax revolving fund is $1,650,000. Industrial facilities tax is $110,000. Special assessments is $60,000. A transfer from the tax forfeiture fund of $620,000. The public improvement fund transfer of $100,000 is budgeted for next year. The court equity fund that we get from the state is $980,000. The DTE program income or test and tune program is $1,520,000. The administrative cost reimbursement represents revenue that other funds pay to the general fund for the support they get from what we call our central service functions, which are accounting, HR, administration, the treasurer's office, all those central services we accumulate those costs and charge the grant funds and the enterprise funds, and that revenue comes into the general fund to offset those operations. That's $2,430,000. A small amount of federal grants of $40,000, state grants of $80,000, and a small amount of investment income of $70,000. Charges for services of $7,460,000. And in an earlier graph, I think I said it was that total charges for services were over $9 million. That included that administrative cost reimbursement for those central service functions. So the sum of those was that $9 million. The remainder is $7,460,000. Fines and forfeitures are $600,000. We get a judicial salary reimbursement from the state of $660,000.
Does that cover all of the costs for the
All of-
salaries?
For the judges,
Yeah.
it covers their salaries but not their fringe benefits. Rental, income is $130,000, and then there's a variety of small other things that add up to $850,000 for a total of $50,220,000 in revenues. Expenditures, this is a balanced budget that's being presented, so we also have $50,222,030 in expenditures for the general fund. This shows the expenditure trend over the last several years. The 2018 budget or actual has also included an extraordinary item for the closure of Brookhaven of $2.3 million. And again, the 2019 budget was a little high, or projected actual, because of the DTE test and tune program expenditures, which is $1.9 million. And this shows expenditures by function. You can see that the largest portion is the yellow slice, which is our public safety, which is the sheriff, the jail, road patrol, all of those public safety aspects of the county at 29.1%. The next largest is our general government at 28.54%, which is red. That's all of your clerk, register of deeds, treasurer, administration, HR, accounting, those are all general county government. And then, again, a large portion at 27.5% is our appropriations to funds outside the general fund.
And recreation and health, does that include our health department?
No, that is included, the health, because that's public health, the appropriation of public health is included in the appropriations.
Okay.
The health component of the general fund is it's mainly recreation, which is considered to be the fairgrounds,
I see. Okay, thank you.
the operation of the fairgrounds. So this is the dollar breakdown of the expenditures by function again. Legislation, which is the County Board of Commissioners, is a $400,000 budget. Judicial, which is all of the courts, and public defender, all of that's included in that, $6.8 million. General government, which are all of those clerk, register of deeds, treasurer that I mentioned. I believe actually the prosecutor is included in the general county government at $14,330,000. Public safety, again, the jail, road patrol, court services, building security, $14,620,000. The recreation and health, as I just mentioned, primarily the fairgrounds, $250,000, and then the appropriations to other funds are $13.8 million, for a total of $50,220,000 in expenditures. Looking at the county as a whole, we just went through the general fund. The county as a whole, all funds, which includes our Health West, Public Health, Wastewater, Solid Waste, all of the other departments. The total revenues for 2020 are budgeted at $226,465,467. Included in that is the general fund at $50 million. Looking at the revenues by category on an all funds basis, as I mentioned, property tax revenues for the general fund are the largest revenue. But when you look at it at an all funds basis, the largest portion is charges for services. And that is because that's due to all the revenues for Health West, wastewater, solid waste. Those are all considered charges for services. So that's why that for, on an all funds basis, is the largest portion of revenues for the county. Then you have your charges for services, as I mentioned. Off my page here. And then you've got intergovernmental is the next largest, and taxes is the third when you look at it on an all funds basis. Looking at expenditures for all funds, $231,579,232. This includes, again, the $50 million for general fund. And looking at expenditures by function, you can see that the largest slice here in blue is health, 45.42%. What's included under health are your public health, wastewater, solid waste, Health West. Those are all considered a health category. And then general government would be the next largest at 29.19%. That's your airport, transportation or transit, our insurance fund, as well as the general fund has a large portion that makes up that. Looking at all funds in total, revenues of $226.47 million compared to expenditures of $231.58 million. You'll notice revenues are less than expenditures, so we've got a negative there, but there are sufficient fund balances or retained earnings in any of the funds that where expenditures exceed revenues to offset that differential.
I have another question. On the all funds revenues by category, what about traffic tickets and fines and stuff like that? Does that come back to the county? Or where does that money go?
There are, I believe there's a portion of the revenues that are in the county, and that would be under charges for services.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, could you explain again that last thing about the how to make up the difference?
so the general fund is not, we presented a balanced budget for the general fund, but there are other funds where we have revenues, expenditures are exceeding revenues. They have reserves or fund balances that will be used up to offset that.
They could be carried over
Yes.
from this year?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, okay.
Museum and Central Dispatch, because they both are supported by a countywide millage, we include them in our overall presentation. They have their own budgets. Central Dispatch passed their budget within the last month or so for fiscal 20. And the museum is actually on a calendar year basis, so what I'm presenting here is really their fiscal 19, calendar year 19 budget. And when they approve their fiscal 20 budget, they will come back to the county board and ask for approval for that. But for purposes of this public hearing, the museum, Lakeshore Museum budget is revenues of $2 million, expenditures of $2 million, and Central Dispatch has revenues of $7.5 million, expenditures of $3.9, so they actually have revenues exceeding expenditures. And I included a note on here that shows that the millage revenue that the museum has is $1,383,000, and the Central Dispatch millage revenue is $1,336,000. So they have other revenue sources that make up the difference.
Is that with their new village?
Their fiscal 20 budget includes their new surcharge.
Oh, super.
Yes. Millage levies. The truth and taxation hearing that we held back in June for fiscal 19's millages set the 19 millages for the county operating. It was approved to levy 5.6984 mills back on July 1st. The museum operating at 0.3221 mills for this upcoming December. The veterans operating, which was also just renewed by voter approval, at 0.0752 mills again for this December. Central Dispatch operating at 0.3 mills for December as well. That does not include the surcharge, that's just the millage. And then the senior activities and services operating millage at 0.5 mills again for this December. This budget, the 2020 budget, anticipates that we will hold another public hearing in July of next year, actually in June. It'll be levied in July, but we'll hold the public hearing in June. And it will also be requesting the same 5.698 mills as we did this year. So this budget assumes the same millage level as the current year. completes my presentation.
Are there any questions? That was fantastic.
I went faster this time.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support. I got a motion for public hearing. Support. We'll vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Beth. Okay, moving on. Items for consideration. The first one is WM 19/09-107, approve repayment of the accounts payable.
Support.
The motion's been supported. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, seems 14 million seems like a huge increase, and I added up all the extras that were itemized, and it came to a little bit over 3 million, so just wondered what the rest was. I'm sure there's an explanation, just want to know what it is.
Just get to that page. Excuse me. I typically only list the ones that are individually over $100,000. And then I have not listed things that are related to like payroll, withholdings, yeah, insurance, payroll related things. And the reason why this one's a little bit larger is it encompasses a longer period of time, August 2nd to August 22nd for checks. And normally it's only a 2-week period that we bring every Ways and Means, but because the last Ways and Means was actually a very short time frame, we only had 1 week of checks in there. This one has 3.
Okay. I knew there was. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Yes.
Beth, are we making any progress with getting paid on some of the outstanding Southwest?
We did receive our monthly payment of just under $2.5 million last week sometime. And as far as I know, we haven't gotten paid on any of the 2017 or 18 older balances. I don't, Brandy might have more updated information than I have at this point, but.
Yes, I can give an update. Brandy Carlson, Health West CFO. So I'm sure you've received my letter where we had officially asked the LRE to change their funding methodology. Within that ask, we've met twice since that letter's been presented. Of course, they're a bit at leeway with the state of Michigan waiting for those funds. But what our partner CMHs have agreed to do is they also, in their cash settlements, some CMHs owe money, some are due money. The ones that owe money have agreed to pay that money to the LRE so then they can in turn cash settle with us for 17 and 18, which is due. I just received the information so that I can officially approve or agree with what they're saying is owed to us, which I did. It's like 2.15 million, I believe, or right around there, a little over 2 million, which I did agree on. So as soon as they get confirmation from everybody, they will in turn pay their payments so that they can give us some net. That was the quickest way we could agree at the LRE level to get some cash flow to help to the county of Muskegon for right now. Doesn't stop the other actions we're taking with the state as well for the supplemental and other items to push cash forward though.
Thank you very much.
You know, Brandy, I wonder if I could ask you, I know that John Snyder is on the LRE board. You both are?
All 3.
Oh, the LRE board, yeah.
Oh, no.
Do you know what's happening with that? I mean, the governor wanted to dissolve it.
They did, they asked for a stay, the LRE, and I don't know, John, if you want to speak to this at all.
There has been a lawsuit filed for an administrative hearing, and a mandamus issued, or to be issued, to prevent the imposition of the change that they're proposing, which would terminate the LRE and superimpose a similar format operated by the state. There is a meeting on Monday in Lansing in which there will be county attending. The chairman of the board here is attending, and I will be attending as well as the administrator, to try to get an explanation of how this is going to be resolved by the state.
Okay. You guys go. Oh, yes.
So has there been any movement on the idea of separating out the Health West payments from the rest of the payments?
For changing that funding methodology?
No.
No,
for-
he's talking about the accounts
Oh,
payable
gotcha.
checks.
Oh,
what
would you
we
speak
see.
to that?
We can start doing that. Again, we would have to change the county's financial policy if you want to totally hold those checks for approval and not pay them as they're being cut, because the county's current fiscal financial policy says that if we have a board-approved contract, or if it's and I believe a copy of that policy went out to all of you, if it's a board-approved contract, if it's reimbursement for personal expenses, if we could lose a discount by not paying it timely, all of those types of things, we cut the check and it gets mailed the week that it's processed for payment. We don't, even though you receive this list to approve, most of these checks have actually already been mailed. So we'd have to change the
My
policy.
understanding was at the last meeting that you were going to create a draft motion of doing that. That's not started?
I have not, I apologize, I did not do that.
We didn't support it.
Wasn't supported, was it?
No, because we have contracts.
And if I could just add to that, Health West noticing, the impact we're having on the county board, per another one of my finance memo updates, we have been going through the checklist,
Yes.
trying to hold back payments as we can until funding comes in, as long as we're staying within that 30-day contractual requirement that we have currently. Our providers have been very accepting of that, understanding our issues as well as the county. So we do go through each check run individually, holding those back as we can.
Anything else? Thank you, Beth. Great. All right, so we're still on 107. There's a motion, it's been seconded. We'll vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That motion passes. The next motion is WM 19/09-108. Approve the amendment to the 19.
Second.
Beth is here, if there are any, you want to just briefly?
Certainly. So in August 22nd, I brought an amendment to the budget, which affected not just the general fund, but many funds, which was approved. Since that time, we've had some more revisions come forward, and I tried to summarize those in writing on pages 8 and 9. The impact of them on the general fund is actually improving the general fund, which is the one I tend to highlight the most. We had originally, back in August, projected a deficit of just under $1 million for fiscal 19. Now that has changed to $689,000 approximately, so it's improved by about $300,000. Many of the reasons are listed, or all of the reasons are listed on pages 8 and 9 of your agenda. Some of the larger ones are, number one, we had some adjustments to the public defender, the indigent defense fund, where there were some vacancies, so we removed wages and fringes for those positions. That reduced the amount of appropriation needed from the general fund by $273,000. We made some other changes. Another large one is number 4 on page 8, having to do with the drain commissioner's budget, and this is actually in conjunction with the drain commissioner. We've actually discussed this. We reduced the expenditures in her general fund budget, which represent primarily the assessments, that the county is responsible for 20% of the assessments. And historically, the assessments are levied on December 1st of every year. We have historically taken that December 1st levy and accrued back the county's portion of that expenditure to the September 30 year, as well as in the drain funds recorded that revenue for a better matching of what the timing it should be in the actual fiscal year that it gets levied in. So we've removed the general funds 20% as well as what we charge the road commission. They're responsible for a portion of that, which comes in as revenue. The net of those two benefited the general fund about $220,000 to $30,000, so that helped reduce our costs in the general fund. Then we had some things go the other way. We had on number 15, I'm just kind of highlighting some of the major ones. Number 15, we increased some expenditures in the jail budget for increase in jail medical services greater than anticipated, so that increased us by $153,000. And we also increased the corporate counsel budget by $75,000 due to some of the costs associated with the ISI case. So those are some of the larger changes that affected, but in the end, we ended up improving the general fund budget for fiscal 19.
Okay,
Russian.
yes.
Yes, are we going to bid out the medical services for the jail?
Not sure the timing of when that contract.
October, I believe.
Sheriff? Sheriff, a question about the medical services in the jail. Are we at a point where we'll be bidding that out in the near future? I don't know what that contract expires.
We just did it last year. Yeah, we just did it last year.
Oh, we just did it last year.
For how many years?
I think it's three with option for 2 extensions.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
I'd just like to say, nice job and thank you to the department heads too for all the work they've put into that, all the cuts they made. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we didn't, we're voting on 108, the amendment to the 19 budget. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. The next item is WM19/09-109. Approve the resolution pledging the county
So moved.
for credit drain bonds. Any questions on this? We have the drain commissioner here.
I'm just gonna lay down a copy of the district in case you'd like to lay your eyes on it. I have other things if you have any questions. We've gone through this before and I think you understand where we're coming from, so unless you have questions.
Okay, so, the drain commissioner's here. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, it's pretty routine. Okay, we'll go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion
Nay.
passes. The next item is WM19/09-110, approve office services. See,
I'm
it's from
sorry,
upstairs,
yeah.
pardon me. Thank you. This is contract, the previous contract is up, it's time to rebid this. Does anybody have any questions about the printing?
Did we get a support? So moved.
This is just a contract that's coming up for a rebate.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I had a motion, was there a second? Okay, so we've got a motion that's been supported. Any other, if there are no other questions, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. The next item is WM19/09-111, approve the sale of the county-owned facility in 1890.
Support.
For those who don't know, that is the treatments are Brookhaven facility. Are there any questions on this? Yes, sir.
Do we typically send these out for auction? And this is the first time I've heard of us auctioning off.
Normally not typically. We've had at least 6 different groups in there looking at the facility and we kept finding very interested. So the realtor here suggested this as an option.
Do we have a minimum on that auction?
There is.
Yes, Charles.
What's the cost to us for the sale?
Mr. Farrer, you know what the cost is?
Per our contract with JLL, there's a 6% and there will be auction fees. He's writing it up that the buyer pays the auction fees.
We don't pay any fees,
We pay our 6%.
just a 6%.
Any other?
I guess I have a question. on
Yes,
that.
Susan.
Since we're gonna go out to an auctioneer instead of him selling it, why would we pay him the 6%?
Right.
Well, he's the one that's had it listed,
But he didn't sell it.
but he's hiring working with the auctioneer, where, you know, there's gonna be a lot of work there, putting contingencies in the contract, we saw the Brinks program there. He's working through all this, it is quite a task.
All right, I just wanted.
You know, before we vote on this, I'd just like to make a comment. I had potential, when I say I had a potential buyer, there was interest expressed from the PACE program here in Muskegon, because they could use independent living facilities. They also have a number of people in nursing homes here. And Matt and I took their director through just a few days ago. And just like everybody else, I think he never even, we were gonna send him some additional information on it, and he responded the same day and wasn't interested. The facility is just too old and it's essentially functionally obsolete. Even though we look at it, it looks like it's great, it's not. It's gonna cost a lot of money to make that the way it would be required to meet today's standards. It's really a shame, but the building is over 50 years old, I think, isn't it?
What's obsolete?
Just they don't do nursing homes or residences like that. There are no showers in any of the rooms. There's no, like, if you want to make it independent living, there's no cooking facilities in the rooms. The showers are down the hall. The building is gigantic.
And it's not asbestos.
So you say some of it's being used?
I think
One wing of it,
One wing
by
of it.
Helpwest, which is Brinks,
Yeah.
that section.
So that's what percentage of the?
Oh, their administration is probably a third, it's about,
Oh,
probably less than that,
nine,
10,
nine,
9 rooms out of
20%.
Yeah, maybe 20%.
Actually, there's about 100 rooms in the building.
So just to let everybody know too, Brinks, I mean, we're talking about Helpwest on this too. If we do find a buyer, and this has always been the case, if we find a buyer, we'll work with them to make sure Brinks are kicked out or left within 30 days. So we need to work with them, the new buyer, to make sure they have plenty of time for Brinks to find a location, or go ahead and contract with Brinks to stay there or something. That's part of the whole picture.
You know, another issue with the building was there really is very little parking there, and that was a big problem. Yes, Zach?
I think Bob, or go ahead. Okay, so what was the listed price for this?
Originally, it was listed at 2.6 million.
What's it listed at currently?
Well, currently it's still listed there at 2.6 million. However, we've had several, very powerful developers with financial wherewithal to do something with it, and they haven't done anything. Typically in a building like this, regardless of what the sticker price is, developers look at it, see what it costs to renovate it, update it, and the last number we ever talk about is the price. The actual price number is.
Well, so the county could potentially in this auction with a $750,000 minimum, somebody could potentially walk away with a $2.5 or $2 million building for a song and a dance.
Yeah, the number was done by JLL based on comps in other areas. It's not worth 2.6 million, I can tell you that.
What's the acreage?
There is, I want to say almost 6 acres, but let me verify that. I'll get that information to Lisa.
And a lot of it's not usable property.
It's not usable, and as Commissioner Scully pointed out, one of the problems with the facility is we can only use it for what it's been used for. You can't use it for something different because there's no parking. There's only enough parking for staff to operate a nursing home. The people there wouldn't be able to drive. There just isn't any parking there. And
Go ahead.
so the value is not worth 2.6 million. I would tell you it's worth negative value because we've had some a lot of people go through there and they decline, and we ask them give us any offer, and they decline.
John?
I'd like to remind us of the history of this building, because we've looked at this over the course of 12 years, and 12 years ago, I recall, we were going to close it, and we kicked the can down the road, and kept kicking it down the road, and here we are now. We're sitting there with a building that it doesn't have any value of any consequence anymore. And we put a lot of money into trying to keep it going and hiring people, when there were a number of people who said that we should close it up at that point in time. And it's time we get rid of this and move on from here, in my view.
I think that the comment that Matt, Works Director, made was the building was like death by a 10,000 paper cut. It's just, the electric bill, just to keep it empty, is, with everything, they even had all the clocks unplugged to get the electric bill down. It was still $8,000 a month. Yes. Charles.
Well, I just wanted to add that, I know what it always seems like, and I do want to see us, try to make this sale, but they said the same thing about a lot of the school buildings. And I don't know if you guys know, but the school building was sitting there vacant forever, and then a company came in, Abshore, and have completely restored and remodeled that old building and made it into a prosperous business, and they're also contributing to the community. So, I would never want to say never, or it's not worth anything, but in somebody's eyes, or the right business eyes, it could be. So, just wanted to throw that out there.
Just as a matter of curiosity, what did they pay for it?
The building? Well, they got it from the
Exactly.
Yeah, I would just point out, as Commissioner Stolnik said, it will bleed us to death by 10,000 paper cuts, and we get them frequently. Repairs here, repairs there. There's buckets in the ceiling. It's got a central heating system, a one-pipe system. So if you heat one room, you heat them all, and there's buckets in the ceiling catching the leaks. I mean, there's a lot there. The building truly is obsolete.
I wanted to just make one other comment. I'm involved with the Boys and Girls Club, and we made an offer on Angel School, which is actually in good condition. It's old, but the building was in good condition. The offer was $10,000, and they accepted it. And this is a similar situation. Yes, Susan?
I'd like to say, I represent Muskegon Township, that sits in Muskegon Township. It wouldn't hurt my feelings to get that back on the tax rolls either. So, I mean, we're we've been sitting on it for a long time and not collecting any tax or any vote or anything on that. So for me, I would really like to see something happen to us. Whether they tear it down and just pay us taxes on it, it's better than nothing.
At your direction, we've been very aggressive. We've called back, these companies have gone through, we've called back, friends that we know to come take a look at it. We've been very aggressive with it. And I would just point out that this is a reserve price, not a minimum. So if someone bids $749,000, we will take that back to you for your consideration. But if it's over $750,000, the sale will be binding.
Okay, anybody else? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. The next motion, let me check here. The final motion is WM 19-09-15 from the sheriff. Approve the sheriff's office to apply for and accept the grant funding.
Support.
Are there any questions? The sheriff is here and the undersheriff is here. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, do we have any details on this grant? And does it only do opioids?
Michael Poole, County Sheriff. The $350,000 for this preliminary program is what we're trying from this grant. Currently, we do give out Vivitrol to individuals when they're coming back into the community, those that qualify for it. This will be for methadone and Suboxone. And it's for those individuals that are coming into our facility already receiving these as prescribed, so they can continue with their medications. So there's an opportunity for us to earn a little bit of revenue on this, and we'll be able to build back the services from the deputies from the inmate movement. And it's really just another avenue, if you will, for our relationship with Health West and helping those that we can, the high substance abuse disorders within the community to get back.
I guess I'm wondering, does this do anything to help those that are using meth? Because that seems to be becoming more of the epidemic and,
No.
you know, the new user thing. So it wouldn't cover any help or assistance for those folks?
So, does anybody else, Sheriff, so if someone comes in and is using methadone or Suboxone, this will allow you to continue that, or are they getting it now?
Well, they could be getting it now, all right? If they're receiving it before they're out, they're not getting it now inside jail. They're not receiving it now.
They're not receiving it in the jail?
No, but we're spending money on other options for them, for withdrawals.
Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why Southwest Michigan Foundation, Southwest?
Yeah, address that?
Health West has been in a partnership with Wayne State University's research team. I think we actually came here to talk with you for the BJA grant that we submitted. So this particular $350,000 will offer us an opportunity to hire a full-time community health worker. It will support a project manager. It will support a physician assistant to come in and give actual medical care to individuals identified for eligibility for these meds. The patients that are already receiving methadone are patients of Cherry Health that are the Muskegon's methadone clinic in contract with Health West. And this helps us to reduce the risk of people overdosing or having the risk of medical emergencies for dropping off methadone without proper care. This will also give us an opportunity to onboard Suboxone for people who are eligible for that option. In big picture, this just helps us as a community attack the opioid crisis that we're in and provide an upgrade in the quality of care given when they're incarcerated.
Yes.
I would like to ask the sheriff, in the transition and trying to help those that are on the program, do you help them with housing and try to navigate back into society? And
Actually, I mean, some of the things we've done in our facility, obviously, one, switching release time when the individuals are going out, so they can not being released at midnight, the early morning of the day that they're getting out. It's now during the daytime, getting individuals out so they can get to those services that they need. But housing is a different issue, and there are programs out there. We did talk about that a little bit at some of our meetings.
This community health worker that this will help pay for, as well as the recovery coach that's already employed in the jail with the Family Outreach Center, both of those positions are charged with doing release planning with the inmate at the time of booking. And so with someone who doesn't have a primary care physician or is homeless or has other of those basic needs that are not met, it is their responsibility to help build a discharge plan to connect them to those resources before they ever even leave jail.
Yes, Susan.
Since Cherry Health is the one that handles all these programs, why don't you just deal with them instead of, it sounds like Community Mental Health is kind of in the middle there. I mean, can't you just deal with Cherry Health instead of Community Mental Health, since they're the ones that you're gonna go to in the first place?
Cherry Health is a contracted service through Health West. And so we're already in a partnership with them. And then this funding opportunity is a partnership with Health West and Wayne State University.
So you're not gonna use Cherry Health at all?
Cherry Health is the current provider for methadone. That is the contracted resource through Health West. So we pay them for their services. I'm sorry?
You can't contract with them, you have to go through Health West.
Well, we have a relationship with Health West, but that's...
The opportunity isn't with Cherry Health, it's with Health West and this particular foundation.
Okay, I think this is a great opportunity. Charles?
So who's going to actually be providing the physicians and workers?
Health West.